It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. That is the Dr. Duke Show. Before we start, do please hit that share button so we can expand the number of people who get to hear this really important information. And today, we start with a startling new report that seems to suggest that Joe Biden's Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, may have actually solicited the NSBA letter comparing parents who voiced their concerns at school board meetings to domestic terrorists. Let me reframe that. Our Secretary of Education, the highest officer of education in the public schools in this country, and also a cabinet member of the Biden administration, may have solicited or was complicit with that organization who wanted moms and dads investigated as domestic terrorists for protesting critical race theory, among other things, at American public schools. This is an outrageous claim, but it really does seem to have legs. And if this is indeed true, and there ought to be a full-throated government investigation of this, if this is true, it is the kind of thing that should remove him from office. The idea that you have the head educrat in this country who was basically helping to summon the FBI to spy upon and track and ultimately dox, if necessary, moms and dads in public schools who just don't like critical race theory and irrational mask mandates.
We know that at least at the highest levels, those being held accountable are simply not.
Yeah, they're still interested in persecuting January 6 people. They're not terribly interested in the treason of their own cabinet.
This is correct. So we want to give kudos to Parents Defending Education. Now, they're the parent group who actually cares about education, and so they are willing to dig into what's happening. And it was emails were uncovered by the Parents for Defending Education, and they found, using the thing called the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, to be able to get access to these documents, that, wait a minute, Miguel Cardona had nothing better to do with his time and decided, how about I request? And by request, I mean demand, essentially. Request, demand, what's the difference at this point? That we just start calling all of our parents who care about their kids' education, well, we're just going to call them terrorists. That's essentially what the skinny is with this one, if you weren't around back in October when this originally happened. So now, it was an October 5th email. The National School Board Association Secretary Treasurer Christy Sweat said that the NSBA interim CEO Chip Slavin, again, interim at the time, so he doesn't really know what's going on. He had told the officers he was writing a letter to provide information to the White House from a request by Secretary Cardona.
So it was Cardona.
It was Cardona who said it.
Got a hold of the NSBA and got them to write a letter, which he then followed up with through the FBI. This is a good idea. Wow, this really is a bazooka shot. Again, Katie's right. I mean, this is the Biden administration. You will watch them impeach Trump for the third time before you see him investigate this. But I want to ask that other question, too.
Well, hold on.
Yes.
I just want to be clear. It's not just the Biden administration. This is just federal government, period. I'm just going to put that blanket out.
Yep, long after Biden's gone.
It's all federal government bureaucracy.
These bureaucrats.
Just putting it out there.
This is the never-ending bureaucrats at the Department of Education who never change.
It's like lamb chop, but not.
Presidents come, presidents go. You can't fire 5,000 employees, I guess. And so all the liberal, progressive, literally progressive liberal human infrastructure of these huge conglomerates like the Department of Education, they never change. You could have the most Republican, you can have the most Democrat president. The thing that matters most is that the progressive bona fides of the Department of Education employees are impeachable, and there's nothing you can do to get rid of them. So take a look, for instance, at this email, everybody. It's Christy Sweat. We just mentioned her. Hi, Marnie. I would love to talk with you about the letter when we are all together this weekend. At the time, no, I didn't think the letter fell under an emergency situation. It certainly was not characterized that way when Chip told the officers he was writing a letter to provide information to the White House from a request by Secretary Cardona. In hindsight, I do think our board needs to have a discussion about a screening process for communications which go out from the NSBA that is aligned with our mission, vision, and purpose statement. If we, the board, can have a productive conversation to identify guardrails, it will begin to address the communication issues that have plagued us. And so this is the NSBA trying to actually be moderately careful here. They don't know if this is their purview. They don't know if this is something they should be involved in. They're a little bit nervous about this. And it's amazing how when we found out this back in October, turned out that it was just a few members of this board, without consulting everybody else on the board, who went ahead and did this. And it makes you wonder where they got the chutzpah, that's a Jewish word for testicles, where they got the chutzpah to go ahead and do this on their own. Now, it's pretty easy to be brave when you got the Secretary of Education himself perhaps pumping you up.
And then when we reported this at the time, in the fallout from this, is there are a lot of state associations, school board associations that are like, we're not on board with this, and actually rescinded their membership in the National School Board Association. So it's not, this is what happens up at the federal level. They get all high and mighty on their little, I don't even know what they were taking up there, but they get all high and mighty and they think they can just, I'm in control and whatever I say goes and consequences be damned. But in this instance, those consequences were damned.
Well, yeah, and so what it seems like we have is Secretary Cardona wanted to punish these parents for daring to phrase their opposition so angrily about what the Department of Education schools were doing. And so he reached out to this organization and basically, wink, wink, go ahead and do this so I can act, right? Well, to the surprise of nobody, Education Secretary Cardona was condemned immediately by Republicans following PDE's action. Quote, Secretary Cardona needs to explain himself to the American people. Parents aren't the enemy, and it would be inexcusable if he solicited that kind of rhetoric from the National School Board Association. Senator Ben Sass, Republican Nebraska, said, quote, in a similar statement, quote, the baseless, dishonest allegations of terrorism in the NSBA are vile because they are designed to silence important discussions about education. The emails we've uncovered, as well as whistleblower information that America First Legal obtained, strongly implies an increased parental engagement in education in issues like that is unwelcome by the federal government and by Cardona himself. Neely said when asked what Secretary Cardona's apparent actions indicate about the Biden administration's attitude towards protesting parents, the response was, quote, parents have been growing increasingly vocal about their displeasure with the state of American education across the board, but it's a real question whether the administration is listening or not. That's not a question, my friend. It has been answered again and again. They're not listening. They're going to do what they're going to do. Your children belong to them. Cardona is grandpa daddy in Washington, and whatever he says goes. And that means more politics, more sexuality, more left-wing garbage in your classrooms, more mask mandates, more teachers unions off the hook, more and more of the same kind of status quo. And now what's different, though, between you and former secretaries of education, now you're finding ways to punish the people you've already beat up and disenfranchised. Way to go, Joe Biden. And I'm going to ask the question, where were all the Republicans when this guy was voted in? Do you remember when Betsy DeVos was trying to become the Secretary of Education, Katie? And all the Democrats voted against her. She was not fit. And she was as middle of the road, blank milquetoast as you're going to get. The Democrats knew that Betsy DeVos, of all people, wasn't going to rattle anybody's cages. And guess what? She didn't. But here you got Cardona, who admitted in his own testimony that he saw sociology and social change as the major part of what education is. He told you who he was, and the Republicans, who are all angry about it now, couldn't be convinced to vote against him. It's a lovely system we've got there in Washington.
With all the censorship taking place on social media platforms, we've made it easy to keep up with your favorite content. Simply download the Freedom Project Media app in your app store. Get access to 18 new videos a week, plus thousands of archived shows, lecture series, and educational animations. Download the Freedom Project Media app on your Apple TV, Roku, tablet, or phone, and make sure you allow for notifications to keep you informed.
Money, money, money. It seems that our school districts have all sorts of money to fund all of this social and emotional learning, and we know that's being driven through critical race theory. So parents don't want it, but what are we to do? What are parents to do? What are they to do? What are the districts to do? According to Education Week, they reported that on the one hand, interest in building or expanding social emotional learning programs is surging among educators and parents, supported by an unprecedented infusion of billions of dollars in federal COVID-19 relief aid. On the other hand, school and district leaders are facing emotionally charged conversations with the public as states consider bills to limit teaching about divisive subjects such as racism and sexuality. Oh my, Education Week. What are we going to do? So, Education Week added some, of course, right-wing political groups are tying social emotional learning and equity to critical race theory, though schools insist that they are not linked.
So look what you got going on here. Katie was very right about this. You have a situation where COVID money that was appropriated from you, the taxpayer, is being pumped into the schools so they can implement COVID reactions? No. COVID solutions? No. So they can enforce social and emotional learning. SEL, social and emotional learning, was a tool we first heard about under the Common Core disaster, in which, I think it says exactly what it is. We are teachers with 4-year degrees in reading, in social studies, in biology, and math. But instead of teaching those subjects that we were hired to teach, we're going to teach your kids social, emotional learning. In other words, we're going to get rid of actual education. We're going to become sociologists in the classroom, and we're going to make feelings more important than knowledge and learning and facts. That's the social and emotional revolution. It is evolving quickly into what we would call DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity education, which is take social emotional learning, which is not about the intellect, it's about the feelings, and it's all about social justice. You get DEI, and DEI is just the next name of critical race theory, because you hate that, just like all the states in the union change the name of Common Core rather than fix Common Core. They know you don't like critical race theory, so rather than get it out of your public schools, they're going to change it to DEI, right? And that's how you're in this mess now.
Well, it's a whole letters, and no one wants to pay attention to that. So let's just talk about the money, because it always is about money. Okay, it's all about the money. Now, between 2019. The 2019-2020 school year and the 2020-2021 academic years, district spending on just social emotional learning programming, not overall, just that little bit of programming, it only grew by 45%.
Wowza.
I mean, just in the 1 year. From when the pandemic started to 1 year later. Why are they spending 45% more on social emotional learning in that time?
And we're talking billions to start with, right?
Well, overall, it's from 530 million up to 765 million,
Nice.
and that's according to a report by a consulting firm, Titan Partners. And you have to remember, the Biden Education Secretary, who we just talked about, Miguel Cardona, back in June talked about the American Rescue Plan, and all that money that was put into that for equity. So when we're talking overall billions, because they're hiding where the money is, we're going to put a little over here and call it equity. Blatantly actually say, okay, social emotional learning, okay, we can actually say some here, but it's hidden in all these other things. What's not hidden is what is actually good to be beneficial for your students and learning things like they're supposed to.
As Biden Education Secretary Cardona, we're back here with where it all starts, announced in June of last year, with the American Rescue Plan and all that money poured into it, it's about, as Katie just said, equity, right? Equity. And you know as well as I do that equity is not equality. It is not opportunity. It is not every kid gets a chance to learn. It is we're going to reward some kids from being black and Hispanic, and we're going to punish kids who are white and Asian just because we can do it. And it's much easier to hold down the high-achieving kids than it is to raise the low-performing ones. And then call the whole system racism anyway and spend more money teaching them about social-emotional garbage and not about anything substantive.
Today's show is sponsored by our friends at MyPillow. Save up to 66% on all items at MyPillow.com when you use the code Dr. Duke. That's DRDUKE. Support this show by supporting a great American company.
Stop the presses. Say it ain't so. We have another fraud in college. A fraud. This time it's a woman who was a Rhodes Scholar. You know, you're going to go to Oxford, you're a Rhodes Scholar. It means you're supposed to be kind of smart. Unless you're not that smart, and then you get caught for being a fraud trying to claim that you're smart. Everyone found out this one woman lied on her applications. She claimed that she had overcome childhood abuse, and she grew up in foster care. And because she didn't actually do that quite, she's the daughter of a radiologist who went to a private school. And her name is Mackenzie Fierstein. She's 24 years old, and she describes herself as a queer, first-generation, low-income student at the University of Pennsylvania. Whoops, not quite. In 2020, she was given a scholarship to Oxford to be a Rhodes Scholar. She dazzled, they say, the Rhodes Trust with her story about how she overcame welfare, an abusive mother, and the foster care system. And she was lauded in the papers, obviously. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, all right. And then a little anonymous tipster called in and said...
Who called in?
An anonymous tipster.
There you go.
To the Rhodes Trust and to the University of Penn and said, this lady over here is being completely dishonest. So let's get a little bit of the backstory here. The person, the anonymous tipster, actually told the schools about how Mackenzie, whose previous name was Mackenzie Morrison, went to a $30,000 a year Whitfield private school in St. Louis, Missouri. Her mother is a radiologist named Dr. Carrie Morrison, and her hobbies at school, our friend Mackenzie, included horseback riding, skydiving, and whitewater rafting. Why they included this information, I don't know, but
is there anything
now you know.
Whiter than whitewater rafting? Is that any more of a privileged tip-off?
How is whitewater rafting?
Haven't you heard all the studies from all the progressives out there that nature hikes and rafting and
you can do that in the mountains, in the backwoods,
that
man.
All this is white supremacy. How oftentimes do you see black people out there whitewater rafting?
Oh my goodness, you're taking a turn on this one. Well, let's get back to our friend Mackenzie, who twisted she very liberally told her side of the story, saying she did in fact spend less than a year in foster care when she was 17 because she told the police that her mother had pushed her down the stairs at their $750,000 suburban home. In telling of her side of the story, Mackenzie said she woke up the day after the incident, drove herself to school, then collapsed in front of a teacher. She says she then woke up in the hospital, caked in blood. Okay? And she referred to her facial features being so distorted and swollen that I can't tell them apart. And she said that when she went to the bathroom, it required nurses and braces had to stabilize most of her body. All of this is her side of the story, okay? Her mom was arrested for abuse at the time. The charges were dropped because there was no evidence of this. And Mackenzie kind of forgot to put that in her admissions essay. She was too busy telling about all this caked in blood and all this. So here's mom's quick side of the story here. She told police Mackenzie asked her to pull some gum out of her hair while she was standing at the top of the staircase. And Dr. Morrison said she tried to, but that she jerked and fell down 2 stairs and then sat down. So a mother-daughter side of the story. Mackenzie did go live in foster care for a little bit then, but she was still at Whitfield, so it was still fine. And she graduated shortly before her 19th birthday, and then she went on, got her degree, and then now she's being punished, which I wonder why.
Yeah, go back for my commentary at the picture of the young woman. Now look, a couple of things. First of all, she is a classic example of virtue signaling culture, right? If you're a young woman like that, obviously white, attractive, what avenue do you have to get any kind of handout? I mean, you're the enemy, right? I mean, the only thing you have, the only thing you don't have that would make you worse is a penis, right? You're a privileged young white woman. And so she's drank the Kool-Aid. The only way you're going to get any attention is if you can't come up with some kind of crazy backstory. Because unless you are the most horrifically treated white person in the history of the world, you're not going to get a lot of these awards anymore. It is very telling to me, though, that the Rhodes Scholarship is first and foremost an academic scholarship. And so they found nothing wrong with her, either the committee found nothing wrong with her academic achievement, that she was qualified for the award, or they were going to let her skate on her qualifications because of her horrible background. Either one of those two things is a disaster. You're the Rhodes Scholarship. Your primary concern ought to be scholarship. But with every other major award in this country now, no, that's not equity. What do? We got to make sure that everybody getting these highest awards isn't your typical white kid.
Now, Fierstein has withdrawn from the Rhodes program, and now the University of Pennsylvania is actually withholding her master's degree. So we have a lot happening for poor Mackenzie and her sad story.
And notice, she may have done the master's degree, may have passed it, but because she wasn't honest about who she was, she might not get that either. Again, academics don't matter at all here. What matters is who you are or who you pretend to be. Time now for some instant classics. We've had fun on the first day yesterday talking about this. There's a new movie coming out. It's The Tragedy of Macbeth. Usually I am the biggest cynic when it comes to movies, number one, and number two, the biggest cynic when it comes to Shakespearean movies because they have been so bad lately. They're all the Shakespeare that's been done lately, whether it's in the theaters or on the movie screens, has been completely overwrought with all this social justice crapple. All of this radicalized social justice theory has really destroyed the great plays of Shakespeare. And now we have the tide turning a little bit. The new movie coming out about now, it's called The Tragedy of Macbeth. It's from last year, 2021, American film thriller based on the play by Joel Coen, right? This is Joel of Joel and Ethan Coen, the Coen brothers, and this is Joel's first single movie that he put together himself. He happens to be married, as Katie informed me, to Frances McDormand, who also stars in the play, and she is also producer of the film. And so this one looks really, really good. On Thursday of this week, I'll show you the trailer for this, which you can find anywhere online as well. I'm really excited because the main character, Macbeth, is played by Denzel Washington. I think perhaps the great actor of this moment, one of our senior, one of our most accomplished, one of our most honest and effective actors we have in all of Hollywood. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this. And as I wanted to do, besides of introducing this movie for you and your kids, I think it'd be a great thing for you to watch with your children to help introduce your kids to this Shakespeare as Shakespeare rather than Shakespeare rewritten as social justice, is to spend a little time on some quotes from the play. Here's a quote from Macbeth. This is the famous scene where Macbeth is on his way to kill Duncan, and on his way, he sees a dagger, right, just floating in the air. And it's an omen, it's a warning, it's a demonic sign, it's a angelic stop, it's a lot of things. But this floating in the air, this dagger, Macbeth doesn't know what to make of it, and he gives you this great speech. He says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee." And as he reaches for it, he can't grab it. "Come, let me clutch thee, I have thee not, and yet I still see thee. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going." I love it, the ending this. He doesn't know what the fake dagger is, that vision, that hallucination, that dream, that sign, that omen. He doesn't know what it means. Does it mean to go forward as the blade is going, or to go back? Is it a go forward, red light or a green light? He doesn't know. But notice the last sentence of his speech. Thou marshallest me the way that I was going. Doesn't matter what you mean metaphysically, Macbeth says. All you're doing is what I have already thought to do, and that is to murder the king. I think it's a brilliant acknowledgement and an honest one from the murderer, Macbeth, that whatever is being situated, whatever is being suggested by this hallucinative dagger, he's going to do what he's going to do. That's human nature.
If you have a question for Dr. Duke and Katie, please send it our way by emailing askduke@fpeusa.org.
And that wraps up the show. We'll see you on another episode. Obviously, for Freedom Project, I'm Katie, and he's Dr. Duke.
Until next time, stay educated.